thank you, Madam Chair and members. Let me start off by saying that I indeed am accepting committee amendments today, if need be. Thank you, Josh. And I'm grateful to your committee staff for the time and thoughtfulness they put in for making this bill better and narrower. As we begin the discussion on this very complex and sensitive topic, it is not lost on me the very real concerns that the opposition has. I have read their letters, and I fully intend to continue to discuss and work through these very important issues. But what also weighs in on me is my time as a crimes against children's detective with the Stanislaus County Sheriff's Office, and where I saw what I believe to be an unspoken and often hidden but scientifically supported impact on pornography. While I don't claim to have all the answers, and I'm certainly not an expert on age verification technology, that's what these guys are here for, this bill, along with the amendments I'm accepting today, is measured, well, let's just say that it's going to make sure then, and I hope everybody's happy with this bill. And with that, I'm going to bring up those that were testifying. Heidi Olson, pediatric nurse and examiner specializing in sexual assault cases. Iain Corby, the executive director for Age Verification Providers Association. And Joseph Kohm, the policy director for the Policy Director for Family Policy Alliance. Thank you.
Thank you. So we've given prior permission to do 2 minutes each, but just for clarity, the opposition will have the same. So when you're ready.
All right. Good afternoon, chair members. I'm Heidi Olson. I'm a pediatric sexual assault nurse examiner. And over the last few years, I have performed or reviewed over 1,500 forensic exams of kids who have been sexually assaulted. A really disturbing trend that we're seeing at our hospital and that's being seen around the United States is that the age range most likely to commit sexual assaults right now are 11 to 15-year-old males. Now, while problematic sexual behavior is a multifaceted issue, no doubt, there's a clear connection between repeated exposure to pornography and child-on-child sexual assault. There are over 100 research studies showing there's a correlation and causational relationship between pornography and violence. Kids don't have fully developed brains. They're really susceptible to what they see in pornography. This is problematic because mainstream porn today is very violent and degrading, and it's the #1 sex educator of our kids today. A recent study estimated that 2/3 of adolescents are currently addicted to online porn. Kids are accessing violent porn at mind-blowing rates. I just talked to a rural high school who monitored their 140 students' school-issued devices, and in 1 month there were 13,000 hits to Pornhub. We are seeing numerous negative effects on tweens and teens, from erectile dysfunction to glorifying sexual violence to increased child sexual exploitation and a fundamental misunderstanding of consent, as pornography does not value intimacy or mutuality. The porn industry has a goal of making money. How do you do that? You create lifelong users. Research shows that the earlier a child is exposed to pornography, the more likely they will be lifelong users. So for those reasons, I strongly support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. When you're ready.
Thank you. Madam Chair and members, I'm Iain Corby. I'm the Executive Director of the Age Verification Providers Association. We represent 30 companies around the world who provide online age verification technology. And our mission is to make the internet age aware, not identity aware. So online age verification can be done and is already being done at great scale. It can be done anonymously, effectively, inclusively, conveniently, and cheaply. So if American technology can put a man on the moon, we can certainly allow you to prove your age online without disclosing your identity. And that's the essence of age verification. If we wanted to do identity, we'd leave that to the much bigger identity industry. So the basic way this is accomplished is by proving your age to an independent third party, and then that independent third party simply says yes or no to an adult site as to whether you're over 18. We believe age verification providers should be independently audited against approved international standards, which not only check that they're getting the results right, but also that personal data is being processed securely and is not retained after the check is completed, as this bill, as rewritten by the committee, explicitly requires. There's an ever-growing number of ways to prove your age. You might use a piece of government documentation or a reusable digital identity, which we compare to a live image to make sure that it's you. You might get data from your cell phone network or utility provider or your bank. And recently we have developed a way of estimating your age based on just what you look like within a year and a half of your actual age. And the Federal National Institute of Standards and Technology has just completed some very rigorous testing of that, and they've published some promising results. It takes just a few seconds, and we're cooperating as an industry to create interoperable, reusable age checks through a project funded by the European Commission originally called EU Consent. This innovation is driving down the cost. The UK government estimates about 12 cents per check, and we agree with them that that price will only go down. So thank you very much for your opportunity to speak to you today.
Thank you. We have this conversation a lot, and that was helpful. The last witness.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Joseph Kohm. I'm an attorney and the policy director for Family Policy Alliance, which is a nonprofit organization that focuses on advancing family values through legislation around the country. And we're proud to strongly support AB 3080. So with the rise of technology, children have nearly unlimited access to adult websites containing age-inappropriate pornographic material. Research shows that by the age of 17, about 75%, 3/4 of adolescents have been exposed to pornography. Research also proves that pornography harms children. Studies show that over 88% of pornographic videos depict some kind of sexual violence, while over 48% of these same videos include some kind of verbal abuse. Studies also show that 53% of male adolescents and 39% of female adolescents actually believe the lie that pornography is an accurate representation of sex. So this means that adolescents are learning about sex from a perspective which portrays sex as physical abuse. Now, additionally, research also reveals that out of those individuals who have been exposed to pornography, 58% access the material unintentionally. So what this means is that adolescents are becoming addicted to pornography through accidental interaction with certain websites that age verification and parental involvement could have prevented. Now, I want you to know that California is not the first state to propose a bill like this. Last year, 7 states of varying persuasions passed similar legislation, and another 8 have passed them through their legislatures this year. Most of these bills have been bipartisan efforts, including some where the legislative houses voted unanimously to pass the bill. And most of these bills have withstood judicial scrutiny. Most recently, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals upheld one of these bills in a landmark decision. The court made clear that states have a compelling interest in protecting children from internet pornography, and that bills like AB 30, which is substantially similar to the bill at issue in that case, do not violate the First Amendment. So right now, Chair members, the average age of first exposure to pornography is between 7 and 13. So AB 3080 is critical legislation necessary to protecting children and empowering parents. We strongly urge you to support, and I'm here for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. That was an impressive exact 6 minutes, team. So I'm going
We've been timing it.
kudos
in my
to
office.
the support on this bill. Anyone else in the room in support of this bill? Welcome to come up. Register your support, name, affiliation, and position.
Rochelle Connor, on behalf of Concerned Women for America, in strong support.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mary Lentz. I'm an associate producer for Disney and Hulu. I'm strongly supporting this bill.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jill Baraka. I'm a survivor who was trafficked in porn at 14 and author of the recent book Coming of Age on a Porn Set, and I am strongly in support of this bill.
Thank you.
My name's Helen Taylor, Vice President for the anti-trafficking organisation Exodus Cry, in full support of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jenna McKay, human trafficking survivor and with Exodus Cry, and I support this bill.
Thank you. Watch that door. It keeps opening behind you guys, but please join us.
Ashley Faison, I'm the founder of an anti-trafficking organization, Diamond Collective, and also a survivor in support of this bill.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Messiah Maddox, and I'm a parent, and I support this bill.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Peggy Delgado Fava. I'm the executive director for Bridge Network, and we work with marginalized at-risk youth. Support of this bill.
Thank you.
Pastor Brandon Campbell, Northern California Director for California Baptist for Biblical Values, in support.
Thank you.
Christine Campbell, just a concerned parent in support.
Thank you. Not just a concerned parent. Keep saying just.
Greg Bird, Vice President of the California Family Council, in support. Thanks.
Thank you.
Brock Campbell, on behalf of Lighthouse Baptist Church in Santa Maria, in support.
Thank you.
Emily Campbell from Santa Maria Lighthouse Baptist Church, and I'm in support.
Thank you.
Hello, Dr. Doug Bennett, Founding Executive Director on behalf of Magdalene Hope, Restoration Ranch Women's Shelter, Rescue Grounds Coffee Company, and People for the Abolishment of Trafficking Humans. I'm a former porn addict and sex buyer, and passing this bill might help a young man go down the same road that I went down. So I urge you for an aye vote.
Thank you, sir. Do we have principal opposition in the room that wants to come up and testify? Oh, okay. Oh, there we go. No, we have someone. She's coming. Join us. Oh, okay.
Just a quickie. Samantha Corbin on behalf of the Electronic Frontier Foundation in opposition to the measure. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm happy to.
Please, there's 6 minutes for the opposition. That's equal time around here. That's part of our democratic process.
Thank you, Chair Bauer-Kahn. My name is Allison Bowden, and I'm personally from Sonoma County.
Stop you 1 second because I think Oakland Privacy might want part of the time. Do you want to share time? Okay. So if you guys want to share time, I just want to make sure we coordinate. Is that okay with you? Yeah, so 3 minutes each. Does that work?
Sure.
Perfect.
So, my name is Allison Bowden. I am the Executive Director of the Free Speech Coalition, which represents people and organizations engaged in constitutionally protected sexual expression. We have hundreds of members throughout California, places like Lafayette, Oakland, San Diego, Long Beach, and of course Los Angeles. I am here to oppose AB 3080 because it's severely flawed both legally and technologically. Legally, the Supreme Court's already ruled that requiring age verification to access protected expression online is unconstitutional. This is why my organization is challenging similar laws in other states, and why it's important to note that the Fifth Circuit decision is being appealed to the Supreme Court as we speak. Technologically, the adult entertainment industry actually supports efforts to keep minors away from our content, but unfortunately this bill is ineffective and has an ulterior motive. As I'm sure members of this committee are well aware, restrictions like this are easily evaded by a VPN, which is a simple technology that's already used by nearly half of minors to change their location when they're browsing the internet, like Netflix. But the fact is, AB 3080 has nothing to do with protecting children. It's about restricting the kind of content that Californians of all ages can access. The language of this bill vastly expands the definition of obscenity, flying in the face of Supreme Court precedent in Miller versus California. Instead of protecting children, this bill will subject all manner of people, businesses, organizations, libraries, to ruinous civil liability for allowing access to indecent material if they can't afford to implement costly age verification technology, and giving them no ability to defend themselves should they be sued because they can't retain proof that they identified any particular person. This bill has gone into effect, or one like it, in other states, and what we've learned is that people don't comply. Upwards of 80% of people, when presented with the option to age verify, leave a website and go out and find one that doesn't comply with laws. This isn't the same as flashing your ID to buy beer. It's transmitting highly sensitive and valuable information over the internet, exposing it to all types of danger. The Supreme Court ruled in Reno versus Ashcroft that, no, it's Reno versus ACLU, that the government can't require age verification where less restrictive means of preventing minors from accessing inappropriate content exist. They did then and they do now. This precedent has been affirmed again and again in courts all over the country, and just last week, Arizona's Democratic governor vetoed a similar bill because it violated the First Amendment.
Thank
We
you.
want minors off our sites just as much as you do, and we're happy to work with this committee to come up with an effective constitutional solution. Thank you very much, Chairwoman and members of the committee and staff.
Yeah.
Hi again, Tracy Rosenberg from Oakland Privacy. I'll be brief. We just sort of want to highlight the fact that we don't need to guess what this would look like if we were going to go forward and adopt it, because it's already happened in 7 states. And what has happened in those 7 states, most of which are states, a lot of whose laws we don't actually like so much, is that, how to say this, the most legitimate and safe pornography options for both adults and youth have vacated the state. They've left. Pornhub is gone. That means that anyone searching for porn in those states is essentially getting pushed to sites that are shadier, less safe, worse cyber security, much more snuff, much more non-consent porn, much more dangerous stuff. I mean, I am not an advocate for Pornhub, God forbid, but they have made progress over the years in getting some of the worst off their site. So what is the incentive in pushing people that are looking for porn away from sites that are safer to sites that are far, far, far less safe? Are we really accomplishing what we want to accomplish here? And moreover, porn is not like a small, teeny, tiny segment of the internet. We tend to kind of think that, but actually 25% of all internet searches are for porn. And that makes me sad, because it's a really high number. Yeah, like all the people in this room, like 1 out of 4. But those are the numbers. So it's a huge amount of internet traffic, and it's going to go somewhere. And so I think that we have to be realistic about, yes, we absolutely don't want kids to see porn. We don't want kids to see dangerous porn, absolutely. But we have to be a little realistic about what we're choosing to do is what the impact is going to be on the ground. And I will say, as a privacy advocate, the whole idea of age verification at shady, ethically questionable, and often foreign porn sites just makes me hurt inside, because so many things are going to go wrong. That is not who you send your driver's license to, or your government-issued identification, or your picture, or anything else, like never.
Thank
and
you.
If we're encouraging people to do that, it's not good.
Thank you. Anyone else here in opposition to the bill?
Good afternoon, Cameron Dimitri with Capital Advocacy on behalf of Net Choice. We have just 2 concerns real briefly. First Amendment concerns with obscene and indecent, the definitions, and to the case that was referenced in ACLU, or Reno versus ACLU, and also data minimization concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other witnesses in the room, bringing it back to the committee. Mr. Bryan.
Learning so much today. Question just for the author, what did you think of the opposition's points?
Well, I think just one, talking about 25% of the usage, makes me even want to do this even more if it's that high. I didn't know it was that high. If you mind, if you want any of my experts to speak on it as well, we could do that.
Just wondering if there's more to discuss with the opposition after, if this bill were to move through committee hearing, if that would be something you'd be open to.
If I may note one thing, it sounds like there wasn't a chance, and I understand this, to review some of the amendments on the definitions around indecent materials that hopefully may address some of the concerns. So hopefully the opposition can review the amendments and see if it addresses some, maybe not all, of their concerns.
Yeah, there's still more to come. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So the bill now doesn't talk about indecency at all. It uses the term sexually explicit content, which is much narrower. So hopefully that addresses some of what we heard today. And I want to thank committee staff, because they went a long way in working on the First Amendment concerns. And hopefully it is, and if it moves out of committee today, it will go to judiciary, which obviously First Amendment is a huge part of what they will be looking at. Ms. Dixon.
Thank you, Chair.
Technical question. The identification, the verification process, how would that work?
Thank you. Jumping around a little. That's a great. There are a number of different ways of doing it. The traditional way would be to use a government-issued ID. The technology is such now that we can do that on your device, so we don't actually have to transmit that information away from the phone. Likewise, with the facial age estimation, that also can be processed entirely on device. And then we use what's known as privacy-enhancing technologies, PETs, so that when you are giving the confirmation to the adult website that the user is over 18, they see absolutely no information about that user. And as this bill requires after being edited by the committee staff, we're not allowed to retain any of that data and would be subject to heavy fines if we did.
So, thank you. So who receives that transmittal of the license or the identification? Who gets it? What, a machine?
So I'm saying it is possible at the moment to do that locally on your own device, so it never leaves. Until recently, that has traditionally gone to an age verification provider. So we have an IEEE standard, a British standard, and there's an ISO, an international standard, against which all our providers are audited. And part of that is confirming that they look after your data while they're doing that process, just as well as your healthcare provider or your bank.
That's true. Well, I think that's a vital part of this. To make it, it's the first time I've ever heard any possible practical, technical solution in order to check identification, other than algorithms and everything else that change every year, or the age would change every year, whereas this could be a definitive privacy-protected identification transmittal process.
If I might just add, the European data protection authorities have been intensely interested in our industry, and the French CNIL and the Spanish AEPD have both produced very extensive new requirements which we are conforming to now in order to meet the very high standards that they expect on privacy.
So you're saying that this is in place?
Yes, so we have through the interoperable solution, which is a tokenized solution, which essentially means once you've proven your age once, you can reuse that same age check in a entirely zero knowledge proof, so that other websites will know that you're over 18 without you having to repeat the age verification process.
I see. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thanks. You got to be careful what you Google when trying to figure stuff out on this. This is a government-issued computer here. If an individual goes in, I missed most of the testimony, and I apologize for that because I'm on 4 committees at the same exact time. So, but when you go into a grocery store and, well, not you or, maybe somebody purchases porn magazine, if that still happens. I don't know if that happens anymore. But back in the day, did you have to show ID, like to buy a?
Sometimes.
The answer is yes. And in fact, one of the cases that the Fifth Circuit relied on, in fact, the primary case was a case called Ginsburg. That's the short name for it. And it was based on a very similar law, actually, from all the way back in the 50s that required the same thing. Basically, if you go into a bookstore that sells, back then, what they called girly magazines or girly books, the adults just had to flash their identification to let them know they were of age. So what the court ruled is that what this bill and what the bill at issue in that case required is basically the online electronic version of the same thing, which is why it's not a substantial burden on adult speech. Adults can watch as much porn as they want to once one of these bills goes into effect. All this does is protects children from coming into contact with it.
I mean, if it's okay with the chair, I'd love to hear
Thanks.
from.
So Ginsburg actually dealt with a magazine salesman who wanted to sell porn to minors. This is not what this bill deals with, and it is actually a very different thing to flash your ID to someone who isn't memorizing it as it would be to maybe pass it around to every single person that now they see your ID. That is much more akin to what an online age verification system does. These bytes are transmitted over the internet. That's inherently unsafe. And despite what my colleagues may have, or my colleague at AVPA may have said, the French government has not approved any age verification technology because none of them meet their privacy standards.
When you, I mean, I've been known to go to a place that sells alcohol in my life,
Certainly.
and some places, especially late at night, they scan your ID in a device that's connected to something on the World Wide Webs, I would imagine, and I assume you're opposed to those devices as well, or?
There's a slight difference in that alcohol consumption isn't protected First Amendment activity. And so someone who got access to somehow that you had scanned your ID to buy an alcoholic
So
beverage.
me consuming a legal product is not a First Amendment activity?
It's not, no.
Or going to a...
Technically, legally, no, it isn't. It's a little bit different.
Well, we had an amendment to the Constitution. Amendment to the Constitution.
But also, depending on what you drink, I don't know, but it also may not reveal preferences you wouldn't want someone else knowing about. Maybe something that could be used against you in a divorce petition. Maybe something that could be used against you at your job, whereas your activity online might be a little more sensitive.
Yeah. I understand the data concerns about IDs and things like that. I literally was just in another committee testifying on a bill about senior fraud, and I proposed this bill. And unfortunately, there are people out there, I don't know where, I don't go to these dark web websites. I don't even know what that is, but I'm told it's out there, and people they're able to accumulate all this information on people, social security numbers, things like that. And so I don't necessarily want to make that problem worse, but presumably there is access to that information for a lot of the fraudsters already. And so I don't really like the First Amendment argument, because it's not for my not being a lawyer, I'm a policymaker and definitely not a lawyer, but my children, and not saying that you are, they don't have a First Amendment right, to do anything in my house, much less look at pornography. So there's protection there. I want to protect the data, and I think I would imagine the author, and correct me if I'm wrong, you would be open to taking some kind of, or continuing the conversation at least, that if there's methods to protect the data, you would be open to that?
As stated earlier, yes, I will.
Okay, great. Well, I wasn't here.
Oh, that's
All
right. You weren't here.
So, all right, because I've witnessed these new technologies. They're coming up all over the place. I just happened to travel to Europe, where they, various things, they wanted you to scan your ID, and not necessarily just for travel, but they're processing the data locally. And I don't know how that works. That's way above my pay grade. And so I think there could be some level of trust, some kind of certification of the technologist that your information isn't going to end up, out there. And I don't know if that technology exists, but I think the premise of the bill, to me, is a supportable one, which is you should have to verify that you're over 18 to look at pornography, and you can look as much. When I say you, sorry, but anybody can look as much pornography as they choose to. And I'm very interested in the data protection, and I would be willing to join in on conversations with the author on how we maybe firm that up a little bit, but because I'm concerned about that. But the policy itself, I support. And so how do we make a better product? Let's do it,
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Ms. Ortega?
I just want to, I want to thank the author for bringing this forward, but also being open to the conversation. I, too, had a lot of concerns and appreciate the fact that you were willing to take the amendments today. As was mentioned, throughout today, this is a very technical, difficult conversation that we're having on all of these bills. The technology is moving a lot faster than we can all catch up with. But as a mother of a daughter, I wish we had done a lot more when it comes to cell phone use and what we're seeing today and the harm that it's causing our children. Had we thought about some of these things ahead of time, we wouldn't be seeing that, today. And so, while I respect and understand the concerns the opposition has, I also appreciate the fact that you're willing to continue working with us. As I will be supporting today, but look forward to continuing this dialogue. It is a difficult one to have, but we need to protect our children, and I think ultimately that's what you're trying to do here today.
I agree. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ortega. Mr. Hoover.
Thank you. The opposition brought up something about an alternative policy. I just wanted to ask, what would be an alternative to this policy?
So if we're going just by what the Supreme Court said, it should be focused on parental filters, which have actually become incredibly effective. There are some issues with being over-inclusive. And so our organization has worked on model legislation that would help sites that essentially understand that they don't want children on them to get rid of them by using the filters. It's called a mature content tag. It is very easy to add to any website, and it would say, if this user is under 18, they're blocked. I believe Meta actually came out with a framework that could work for apps and websites, wherein your cell phone knows how old you are, and it knows how old a child is if it's owned by a child, and being able to not necessarily share a date of birth because that's sensitive, but at least have a flag that says this is a minor. Our websites would have no problem rejecting that traffic.
So you're saying essentially using the hardware,
correct,
as the method of
or software on the hardware, but essentially
correct, yeah.
kind of
essentially like your device knows your private information versus.
I would imagine it's more like turning away a person at a bar at the door.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Look, I really appreciate the conversation. I think. I actually had a similar bill last year. I do think that, to my colleagues' comments, I think that as a parent, this is just too important of an issue. But I do look forward to continuing conversations on privacy specifically because I do think protecting people's privacy is important, but we'll be supporting the bill today. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Dixon, I have one more question. We'll go to Ms. Wilson.
Oh, go ahead.
Thank you to the author. I definitely understand the intent in terms of protecting our children underage against things they shouldn't be allowed to view, things that would harm them. I mean, things, the actual language in the bill, things that are harmful to minors. And I think we, not only as parents, shoulder that responsibility, but we as a community. I think this is one area where the government has interest in protecting children because, not to be cliche, they are our future. And so if we don't protect them when they're young, we can't be surprised at the kind of future we have in the future. Some of my concerns do relate to the First Amendment, like balancing that part, because the government interest also has interest in protecting our rights, and very much strongly there's a First Amendment right here. And so some of my questions are to your witnesses in following up. There was an example given in terms of it's similar to going to a store and prior to purchasing goods that are above the age of 18 or 21 or whatever, showing, an ID. Which is definitely not the same, as was noted from the opposition, as retaining an ID. And there was conversation about tokens that you can have that I guess are on the computer or device that would be allowable for other sites, but that feels like a retention of sorts. So can you explain that to me?
Yes, so the tokenized solution would, which is something that the Spanish Data Protection Authority is very keen on, is having an application on your phone and you prove to the application, perhaps using a digital identity or using a piece of ID, that that you are over 18, and then all that application does is send effectively a signed certificate that you are over 18 to any website that is age restricted.
So your data isn't sent to that person, just a green light, so to speak?
It's a green light which has been signed by a trustworthy authority, so that the adult website can trust that when it sees that green light, it knows the only people who could have done that were people who have properly proven their age and are actually the person using that device. So it's not a month later where it may have been handed down to somebody's kid when they upgraded their phone, and the issues we have with that sort of second-hand phone problem.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things you noted, and I believe it was brought up in part of the other conversation, I had it for here, was talking about France, right? And they, it says in the analysis that it found that no method has the following three important elements: sufficiently reliable verification, complete coverage of the population, and respect for the protection of individuals' data, privacy, and their security.
Yes, so what the CNIL did, which is the Data Protection Authority, and the L in CNIL is for liberty, so they are very keen on freedoms and the protection of privacy, is while they criticised existing methods a couple of years ago, they didn't just criticise, they came up with a better way of doing it. And what they come up with is something called a double-blind solution. And that allows, again, through this concept of signed certificates, the CNIL themselves have invented a solution that they are satisfied meets all of those requirements. So what I would say to this committee, and as we go through the process of discussing the detail of this bill, you can set the bar as high as you like for privacy protection, as the CNIL have done, and the industry will step up. So there are now at least 5 providers in France who have developed solutions that meet these very new, very high requirements from the CNIL.
And so are you saying that the analysis noted that comment from 2022, but it's 2024? So since 2022 and that comment was made, that there's a gold standard now that satisfy those three, and that is an outdated comment?
Well, the CNIL themselves are the ones who've invented the solution to their problem. So they said, they didn't just say we don't like the way you're doing it. They said, we don't like the way you're doing it. We've got a better way. We would like your industry to try and do it this way. And we announced last week at a big conference in Manchester in England that we were, as an industry, moving to this double-blind approach, where it's impossible for the website to know the identity of the user, and it's impossible for the age verification provider to know which websites the user is going to. I have a lot of sympathy for what...
I half understand what you said.
Yeah.
I just want to confirm. In the committee analysis that we're reading, there's a statement from 2022 that's had 3 components, that there was nothing existing at that time that had those 3 components: sufficiently reliable verification, complete coverage of the population, and respect for the protection of individuals' data and privacy and their security. And although that came out of France, I would say that that is a standard that we have in the United States. Okay. So we've established that they've made that statement, it's put in our committee analysis. And so what I'm asking is, and you were talking a lot about CNIL, that's the CNIL, the France, for people in the room, National Commission on Information Liberty. You were saying that they made that statement in 2022. However, today, on what is it, the year of our Lord, April 16th, 2024, they have now met a standard of those 3?
Indeed, they went and worked with a Professor Blasi, a French professor in cryptography, and he worked with them to come up with this new solution. What we've been subsequently trying to do is figure out how we commercialize that, because...
Okay, so a new solution exists, it is yet not deployed.
Well, I mentioned that 5 French providers have stepped up to provide that, and the official regulator, Kohm, which is in charge of internet safety, works with CNIL, and they've just launched their consultation on the detailed rules that require at least one method for any adult site to meet these requirements of double blind that the CNIL have said. So what we're seeing around the world is regulators raising the bar to
To meet the three, we're going to
to-
call them the three.
indeed,
Meet
yeah.
the three standards, but it is not it's not something that's active. And I do get in technology, things are exponential. Something cannot be active today, and literally a month later, it's all over the globe and it's completely active.
It's in so one of those 5 suppliers is a member of my trade association, and they currently offer that as a product in the market today. People are actually using that double-blind approach
In the market today.
in France.
Europe, but not in the U.S. yet.
No, I mean obviously, there's no law here requiring it, but
Right. That, but it is being actively, it's deployed, and
Yes.
someone is using it.
Yes.
Right, and part of the association. And I do recognize that you are testifying with the hat of the association. And so, of course, this benefit, and not to say that the author has this motive. In some ways it benefits because you are part of the association that provides this basic service that we would then be putting into law. And so recognizing that, at the same time recognizing that, and so I don't mean that in a disrespect to the author, in the same level, we need to protect our kids. So how do we do that? I'm very much concerned about the privacy aspect of individuals, especially as it relates to this particular topic, because it can be weaponized against the person if there is some type of, and I'm not talking about minors, I don't want any child looking at these sites in particular, as it's laid out in the bill and the definitions that Madam Chair has given. But I also recognize that we live in a society where people weaponize us all the time for every little thing. We sit in privacy. I'm sure after this committee today, there's going to be tweets about various decisions, and you must like this or, whatever. We are. And then just imagine if someone was able to get that data, that because of that type of verification system, because the language in this bill doesn't require the type that's used. It just requires an age verification system or some type of system that could be used against someone in a nefarious way if it's hacked or whatever. And so we live in that world. So I think as if there's support for this to move forward, I think you have to take, because we're in privacy, right, and consumer protections, you have to take that into consideration. Because there is a role, I think, for the parent. There's a role for devices, as my colleague has noted, putting things on, or I think opposition noted in that conversation, that you can do things locally to be able to prevent that, not necessarily on the burden of the site where you're giving third-party information. I think that's, like I said, just balancing the needs of everybody else who has an absolute right to be able to exercise their free speech to produce content, and exercise their right to be able to take part in it by viewing it. And so we want to make sure we're balancing those needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Ms. Dixon, did you have another question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a few follow-up questions. So I just kind of want to distill everything down. I think, at least this is where I'm coming from, it's not a good thing to have children, youth under 18 accessing pornography. We're trying to find a way in this hyper-technology world to find a way to make sure we protect everybody's rights, or at least, I guess, the children's rights. I don't know, I kind of like my colleague here saying I didn't know that children under 18 had rights to access pornography in a free speech context. Anyway, this seems to be an obstacle to me. I think the larger issue is the technology changes so quickly, and just these protections that we've just heard are satisfactory to me. And technology is moving so fast that if we don't try to put a stop to this kind of material being accessed by children on the internet, and we've heard earlier in the testimony of the 25% of the world is accessing this information. We can't do anything about adults, and the U.S. Supreme Court has dealt with that decades ago. But as far as children, I think we err on the side of doing whatever it is to protect our children and move forward with that concept that these technologies can protect the identities of people, children, whoever submits through that process. I mean, we've all used those kinds of things. I mean, even with your health plan and medical plans, you submit copies of your driver's license. That happens, and then it disappears. Anyway, I'm in strong support because it's time we do something. We could debate this to infinity and beyond, but we have to protect our children. And that's very simple to me, in my opinion, and I will be enthusiastically supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dixon. Anyone else? Seeing no other members with questions. I want to thank you, Assembly Member, for your partnership on this. I know that the original bill was introduced, probably as evidenced from the committee amendments we had concerns about, but I shared your goal here. There was an article in the New York Times just this weekend talking about the alarming number of college-age girls that are reporting being choked while engaging in sexual activities without their consent, and the dire physical ramifications of that on their brain and the oxygen that is deprived to their brain. If I recall correctly, it was 40% of college-age girls, and the studies cited discussed exactly what your witness talked about, which was that this was most likely a result of very young kids being exposed to very violent pornography, which I know is not something that the opposition wants either, but it is something that is happening, and it's happening in a lot of cases, as was noted by the proponents of this bill, accidentally at first. That people, and I know that as a mom, you know, it's then sought out. I'm not saying it's not also sought out by youth, but I know as a mom whose kid has written reports, and while researching for those reports has definitely accidentally encountered websites I don't want my child on. It happens to all of us parents. There's no question about that. And we use all the parental protections that are available to us. And so, you know, I do think that there is no question in my mind that making it more difficult for our youth to access these sites is in the best interest of everybody, whether it be the person viewing it or the person who they will engage with in sexual activity later in life. And so I think this is a really important policy. And I think that we have done a lot in this committee, and huge kudos to the staff for their work on this, to really narrow it to what is constitutionally reasonable, to make sure that it passes constitutional muster, which is always in the best interest of the state of California, so that we don't have to spend a lot of money on litigation. And also to protect privacy, as was noted by, you know, the proponents. We did say you can't keep this private information. That was something that we added. I also think, though, there is, if we can match the Europeans in any way as it relates to privacy, we are winning. The Europeans' privacy laws will eclipse anything here in the United States any day of the week. And so to the extent that the Europeans have created better standards for age verification that are more privacy protecting, I think that is something we could look at. We do a lot of legislation in this body that mimics what has happened in Europe, and it's something that we should consider if they do have a way of doing it that is more privacy protecting than is what is currently in the language. But I just want to thank you, because I do think we have a serious problem here, and I think you have been open to really addressing it in a surgical way, but also doing what is in the best interest of our kids. And I said this in a committee hearing earlier today, but I'll say it again. I truly believe that as the elected members of the state of California, our number one obligation sitting in these seats is to protect our kids. And so, you know, I think that this is a step in the right direction. I thank you again for taking the amendments and working with us. And I know you will continue to do that because you've already proven that you will. So with that, would you like to close?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, for those words. And yes, rest assured, obviously the sponsors and myself, we're here to bring policies that will protect our children. And I think with the committee's help in narrowing and making sure that this is within the laws that have been set forth, we'll make sure that this happens. As far as opposition, please come to my office. I'm sure we'll get some cards for you guys as well. I'd like to hear from you as well, as we've already heard from others. With that, I would respectfully ask for your aye vote. Thank you.
Great. Do we have a motion? I don't think we've moved. We have a second? Second. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Item number 5, AB 3080 by Assemblymember Alanis. The motion is due pass as amended to the Judiciary Committee. Bauer-Cahan.
Aye.
Bauer-Cahan, aye. Patterson. Aye. Patterson, aye. Bryan. Aye. Bryan, aye. Dixon. Aye. Dixon, aye. Hoover. Aye. Hoover, aye. Irwin. Irwin, aye. Lowenthal. Aye. Lowenthal, aye. Ortega. Aye. Ortega, aye. Ward. Wicks. Wilson. Aye. Wilson, aye.
Bill has 9. It is out, but we will leave it open for absent members. Thank you.
Thank you.